Vincent Kane pressed his forehead against the cool glass window of his penthouse suite, watching the sun dip below the horizon. 34 years old, owner of 12 luxury hotels across 3 countries, and he felt absolutely nothing. The reflection staring back at him showed a man dressed in a perfectly tailored midnight blue suit, Italian leather shoes, and a watch worth more than most people earned in a year, yet the eyes in that reflection looked empty. Below, the Crystal Bay Hotel buzzed with preparation for the biggest social event of the season. His hotel, his party, his life on display for everyone to admire and envy. Staff members scurried across the marble lobby like ants, arranging flowers that cost thousands, positioning champagne towers that sparkled under crystal chandeliers, creating an atmosphere of extravagance that he had once found thrilling. Now it just felt suffocating. His phone buzzed for the 15th time that hour. Vincent glanced at the screen and saw another message from Victoria Ashford, editor of a prominent fashion magazine. She had been texting him for 3 days straight, dropping hints about her dress, her plans for midnight, her hopes for the evening. She was beautiful, successful, and completely predictable. The phone buzzed again. Natasha Sterling this time, the investment banker whose family wealth made his fortune look modest. Then Olivia Chambers, whose interior design firm had decorated half the celebrity homes in the country. Then Diana, Rachel, Katerina, and Bianca. 7 women, 7 messages, 7 variations of the same theme. They wanted to be seen with him when the clock struck midnight. Vincent tossed the phone onto the leather sofa and walked to his home bar. He poured himself 2 fingers of scotch, the expensive kind that collectors fought over at auctions, and it tasted like nothing. Everything in his life had become like that, expensive but flavorless. Thomas Grant, his business partner and closest friend, knocked once before entering. Thomas had the kind of easy confidence that came from growing up wealthy, the comfort of never having to prove himself. He grinned when he saw Vincent at the bar. "Starting early tonight?" Thomas helped himself to the scotch. "You know there are at least 7 stunning women downstairs who have spent hours getting ready just to catch your attention." Vincent swirled the amber liquid in his glass. "That is exactly the problem. Most men would consider that a good problem to have. They want to catch Vincent Kane, the hotel mogul. They want the man whose name opens doors and turns heads. None of them want to know the person behind all this." He gestured vaguely at the opulent penthouse, the view, the trappings of success. Thomas studied his friend with concern. "When did you become so cynical?" "Maybe around the time the 3rd woman told me she loved me after knowing me for 2 hours, or when I realized every conversation at these events follows the same script. Everyone wants something. Nobody cares who I actually am." The truth was heavier than Vincent wanted to admit. He had built his empire from almost nothing, working brutal hours, taking calculated risks, sacrificing relationships and sleep and pieces of himself along the way. He told himself it would be worth it once he reached the top, but now that he was here, the view looked remarkably lonely. Thomas clapped him on the shoulder. "You need to snap out of this mood before the party starts. People are expecting the charming Vincent Kane, not this melancholy version. Maybe they should meet the real version for once. The real version would be bad for business." Thomas meant it as a joke, but the words stung because they were true. An hour later, Vincent stood in the hotel's grand ballroom, surrounded by 300 guests dressed in designer gowns and tailored suits. The room glittered with wealth and beauty. A live orchestra played sophisticated melodies, while waiters in crisp uniforms glided between clusters of conversation, offering champagne and delicate appetizers. The 7 women found him within minutes. Victoria arrived first, stunning in a crimson dress that clung to her figure. She kissed both his cheeks, leaving a trace of expensive perfume. "Vincent, darling, you look absolutely magnificent." Before he could respond, Natasha appeared at his other side, her silver gown catching the light like liquid metal. "I saved you a seat at my table, prime view for the fireworks." Then came Olivia, Diana, Rachel, Katerina, and Bianca. 7 women, 7 messages, 7 variations of the same theme. They wanted to be seen with him when the clock struck midnight. Vincent tossed the phone onto the leather sofa and walked to his home bar. He poured himself 2 fingers of scotch, the expensive kind that collectors fought over at auctions, and it tasted like nothing. Everything in his life had become like that, expensive but flavorless. Thomas Grant, his business partner and closest friend, knocked once before entering. Thomas had the kind of easy confidence that came from growing up wealthy, the comfort of never having to prove himself. He grinned when he saw Vincent at the bar. "Starting early tonight?" Thomas helped himself to the scotch. "You know there are at least 7 stunning women downstairs who have spent hours getting ready just to catch your attention." Vincent swirled the amber liquid in his glass. "That is exactly the problem. Most men would consider that a good problem to have. They want to catch Vincent Kane, the hotel mogul. They want the man whose name opens doors and turns heads. None of them want to know the person behind all this." He gestured vaguely at the opulent penthouse, the view, the trappings of success. Thomas studied his friend with concern. "When did you become so cynical?" "Maybe around the time the 3rd woman told me she loved me after knowing me for 2 hours. Or when I realized every conversation at these events follows the same script. Everyone wants something. Nobody cares who I actually am. The truth."
Sophie Bennett pushed through the swinging kitchen doors and leaned against the cool metal counter, trying to steady her breathing. Her hands trembled slightly as she set down the empty tray. The industrial kitchen hummed with activity around her, chefs shouting orders, dishwashers clanging, ovens hissing steam, but all she could hear was the pounding of her own heartbeat. He had looked at her. Vincent Kane, the man whose face appeared on business magazine covers, whose hotels were synonymous with luxury, had looked directly at her across that glittering ballroom. And for one impossible moment, the world had shrunk to just the 2 of them. "Sophie, you look flushed. Are you feeling all right?" Mrs. Patricia Moore, the event supervisor, appeared beside her with a concerned expression. Patricia was a round woman in her 50s who ran events with military precision but had a soft spot for her younger staff members. "I'm fine, Mrs. Moore, just warm from running around." "Well, catch your breath quickly. We need you back out there. Table 17 needs fresh drinks, and the VIP section is asking for more of those crab canapes." Patricia handed her a newly loaded tray. "And Sophie, remember to smile. These people tip well when they feel special." Sophie nodded, straightening her posture and fixing her expression. This job paid 3 times what she made at the diner where she usually worked. One night of serving champagne to rich people would cover her sister Lily's textbooks for the entire semester. She could endure anything for 5 hours if it meant Lily could stay in medical school. She pushed back through the doors into the ballroom, the noise and light washing over her like a wave. The contrast between the 2 worlds always struck her. Back in the kitchen, everything was practical, efficient, real. Out here, everything was performance, beauty, illusion. Sophie moved between tables, offering drinks and collecting empty glasses. She had learned to make herself invisible at these events. Rich people did not really see the staff. They looked through them, around them, but rarely at them. It was easier that way, less awkward when you overheard their complaints about problems that were not really problems, their gossip about people you would never meet, their casual mentions of spending more money on a handbag than Sophie earned in 6 months. She was refilling glasses at table 9 when she felt it again, that sensation of being watched. Sophie glanced up and saw him standing near the bar, partially hidden by a marble column. Vincent Kane was staring directly at her, not with the vacant gaze of someone lost in thought, but with focused attention that made her pulse quicken. Their eyes met for the 2nd time that evening. Sophie quickly looked away, nearly spilling champagne on an older woman's lap. She apologized profusely, cleaned up the small splash with a napkin, and hurried toward the kitchen. This was ridiculous. She was acting like a teenager with a crush. Vincent Kane was not looking at her in any meaningful way. Men like him did not notice women like her. He was probably just spacing out, his eyes happening to land in her direction while his mind was somewhere else entirely. But when she glanced back over her shoulder, he was still watching her, and now he was moving, walking purposefully through the crowd in her direction. Sophie's heart jumped into her throat. She picked up her pace, weaving between guests, heading for the safety of the kitchen. But the ballroom was too crowded, her path blocked by clusters of people engaged in animated conversation. She felt trapped, like a mouse being tracked by a cat, except she could not understand why someone like Vincent Kane would be tracking someone like her. She turned left toward the service bar, thinking she could slip behind it and disappear through the staff corridor, but he was faster. Suddenly he was there, standing between her and her escape route, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something subtle and expensive that probably cost more than her monthly rent. "Excuse me," Sophie said quietly, keeping her eyes down. "I need to get through." "Wait, please." His voice was deeper than she expected, with a warmth that the business magazines never captured. "Call me Vincent, and I will talk to Patricia if there is any problem. I own the hotel, remember?" "That is exactly why I should not be standing here talking to you." Sophie glanced nervously at the VIP section, where 7 stunning women were watching their interaction with varying degrees of confusion and irritation. "You have guests waiting for you, important guests." Vincent followed her gaze, and something flickered across his face. Annoyance, maybe, or resignation. "Those women do not want to talk to me. They want to talk at me. There's a difference. I'm sure they're very nice people. They are accomplished, intelligent, beautiful people who have spent the entire evening trying to impress me with their achievements and connections, but not one of them has asked me a single genuine question. Not one of them has looked at me like I'm a person instead of a trophy." He paused, studying her face. "You looked at me like I'm a person." Sophie felt heat rising in her cheeks. "I looked at you for barely a second. It was the most honest second I have experienced all night." The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. Sophie had expected arrogance, entitlement, the casual superiority that came with extreme wealth. Instead, she heard something that sounded almost like loneliness. "What do you want from me, Mr. Kane?" "Vincent," he corrected again, "and I want to know your name." "Why?" "Because you're the only person in this entire ballroom who is not trying to get something from me. Because when you smiled at those businessmen earlier, it was real. Because you bit your lip in concentration when you were navigating through the crowd, and it was the most genuine expression I have seen in months." He ran a hair through his dark hair, looking almost embarrassed. "I know how this sounds. Trust me, I know. But I just want to have one real conversation tonight with someone who sees me, not my bank account." Sophie should have walked away. Every practical instinct she possessed told her that nothing good could come from this interaction. Men like Vincent Kane did not.
The service balcony was nothing like the grand terraces that guests paid premium prices to access. It was a narrow concrete strip tucked behind the main building, decorated with nothing but a rusted metal railing and scattered cigarette butts that the cleaning crew had missed. The ocean view was identical to the one from the penthouse suites, but nobody marketed this perspective. This was where the invisible people came to breathe, to step out of their uniforms and remember they were human. Sophie leaned against the railing, letting the salt air cool her flushed face. She had exactly 15 minutes before Mrs. Moore would come looking for her. 15 minutes that she was probably wasting on a man who would never show up, who had likely forgotten their conversation the moment she walked away, distracted by the 7 beautiful women competing for his attention. She checked her phone. 3 messages from her sister Lily, all variations of the same excitement about starting her clinical rotations next month. Sophie smiled despite her nerves. Everything she did was for moments like these, for Lily's dreams that were finally becoming real. The late shifts, the aching feet, the humiliation of serving people who looked through her like she was furniture. It was all worth it. The door behind her opened with a metallic creak. Sophie spun around, her heart jumping. Vincent Kane stepped onto the balcony, and the sight of him in that expensive suit, surrounded by concrete and rust, was so absurd that she almost laughed. He looked completely out of place, like a prince who had stumbled into the wrong kingdom. "You came," she said, unable to hide her surprise. "You thought I would not?" "Honestly, yes. I figured you would get pulled into conversations with important people and forget about the waitress you met for 30 seconds.
Vincent walked to the railing beside her, leaving a respectful distance between them. I told Thomas I needed air. He thinks I'm having some kind of crisis. He's probably right. What kind of crisis? The kind where you realize your entire life is built on things that do not actually matter. Vincent stared out at the dark ocean, waves catching moonlight like scattered diamonds. Do you know what I did today? I spent 3 hours in a conference call arguing about the thread count of sheets for my hotels. 3 hours of my life discussing cotton fibers, and everyone treated it like it was incredibly important because it affects profit margins and guest satisfaction scores. Was it important? In the context of running a successful business, sure. In the context of being a human being who will die someday, not even a little bit. He turned to look at her. What did you do today? Sophie considered lying, making her life sound more interesting than it was. But something about the way Vincent had opened himself up made her want to match his honesty. I woke up at 6 to work the breakfast shift at a diner, served pancakes and coffee to construction workers and truck drivers, came home, helped my sister study for her anatomy exam, changed into this uniform and took 2 buses to get here by 5 o'clock. Tomorrow I will do it again, except the diner instead of this party. That sounds exhausting. It is, but it's real. Every dollar I earn has a purpose. Lily's tuition, our rent, groceries, utilities, nothing is wasted on thread counts. She said it without bitterness, just stating facts. Vincent was quiet for a moment. Your sister is in school? Medical school, 2nd year. She's going to be a doctor, the first person in our family to finish college. She's brilliant, way smarter than I ever was. What about you? Did you want to go to college? The question hit a tender spot that Sophie usually avoided. I did. I wanted to be a teacher. Elementary school, maybe kindergarten. I love kids, love watching them discover things. But my parents died in a car accident when I was 20 and Lily was 15. Someone had to take care of her, make sure she didn't end up in the system, so I worked instead. That must have been incredibly hard. It was the only choice that mattered. Lily is my family. You don't abandon family. Vincent studied her face in the dim light filtering from the ballroom windows. You gave up your dreams so she could have hers. I didn't give them up. I postponed them. Once Lily finishes school and gets established, maybe I'll go back. I'm only 26. Life is long. She said it with conviction, trying to convince herself as much as him. Life is long, but time is strange. You think you have forever to do the things that matter, and then suddenly you're 34 and realize you've spent a decade building an empire, but forgot to build a life. You have a life. Look at where you are. Look at what you've accomplished. I have assets, properties, numbers in accounts, but what do I actually have? His voice grew more intense. I cannot remember the last time I had a conversation that wasn't about business. I can't remember the last time someone touched me without wanting something in return. I go to sleep alone in a bed that costs $20,000 and wake up feeling like I'm suffocating. Sophie didn't know what to say to that. The problems of a millionaire should have seemed ridiculous compared to her struggles with rent and grocery bills. But pain was pain, regardless of the bank balance attached to it. Loneliness didn't care how expensive your sheets were. The women at the party, Sophie ventured, they seemed interested in you. Vincent laughed, but there was no humor in it. They're interested in Vincent Kane, the brand, the hotels, the lifestyle, the status of being seen with me. Victoria wants publicity for her magazine. Natasha wants a business connection. Olivia wants to design my next property. They're all playing a game, and I'm the prize. But none of them want to know who I actually am. Maybe you're not giving them a fair chance. I've given them plenty of chances. I've dated women from that world. Beautiful, accomplished, intelligent women. But every relationship follows